Okay, so hello and welcome to today's event, everyone. I'm Jason Gumpert from MSDynamicsWorld.com. We are here for a session all about paperless purchasing and AP with Dynamics GP. I'm joined by Derek Hicks. He is the president and co-founder of PM3 Solutions. It's great to welcome Derek for the first time presenting for us. And as we get started, I'd just like to cover a couple of points. Please know that we do welcome your feedback and questions during today's event. You can use the Q&A block at any point during the event to ask questions. I know Derek will be leaving time to take those. You can find the Q&A block off to the right side of the WebEx window that we're in right now. And in the spirit of keeping things interactive, there will also be a couple of poll questions to look out for further into the presentation here, so please be on the lookout for those. Finally, there is a on the right side of the webcast window, there's an area called Media Viewer that you might see, and that adds a new form to the session. If you click into that, you can use that form to schedule a follow-up with Derek and the PM3 Solutions team. If you fill that in at any point, if you have to step out or would just prefer an individual follow-up, the PM3 Solutions team will be able to reach out with that information. I know they'll be making time and I know they'll be making time to address any feedback along the way as well. So without further delay, please allow me to welcome Derek Hicks to start things off.
Great. Thank you, Jason. And thank you, everyone, for joining today's session. Just to give you a little bit of idea of how we're going to organize things today, first I'm going to go through just a few slides to kind of talk about the value of purchasing and AP automation. We've been implementing purchasing and AP automation solutions for Dynamics GP users for almost 10 years now. So we've got a lot of experience not only helping organizations automate purchasing and AP, but integrating with Dynamics GP as well. So we've seen almost everything there is to see as relates to GP, or at least we think we have, and so we can really help you kind of automate your processes if that's an objective that you have. So first I'm going to share with you kind of the value proposition, if you will, in a few slides, and then it's always helpful to see the tool in action. So I'll take a step back and we'll go through some actual workflows so that you can see PM3 and walk away from today's webinar with a little bit of an indication as to whether it could potentially be the right fit for your organization. So without further delay, I'm going to go ahead and jump in. As Jason mentioned, if you have any questions, please feel free to post those, and we'll stop periodically and try to address any questions that have come in. So as everyone knows, the accounts payable process in most organizations is extremely collaborative. You've got people in virtually every department integrating or working with accounts payable to get your vendor invoices, expense reports, check requests, to get those processed. So it's a very collaborative process, and it touches a lot of different people. One of the major challenges our clients have told us they faced, and reason why they went with PM3, is that the process becomes extremely challenging when you introduce so much paper into the process. If you've got a lot of people who are collaborating to get things done, and then you have introduced paper into the process, and that tends to create islands of information that make it difficult for the process to run as efficiently as, in many cases, you'd like it to run. And so we find a lot of clients have said, hey, you know, before PM3, we struggled getting timely approval of our payables transactions. We also struggled being able to track the status of transactions because at a moment's notice, we, in many cases, didn't know where transactions were. We also had to worry about filing those invoices and related paperwork. Then we had to worry about retrieving those files when we need them. And so we've, over the last 3 or 4 years, have seen a strong push for organizations that have said, hey, we need to be able to streamline this process. And then again, we have about 30% of our clients that said, you know, we're addressing the AP process, but we also want to make sure that we have an efficient way for our organization to manage the spend, and so we'd like to have an efficient tool to use for purchase authorization as well. And so today's webinar will really address both of those. But we say that we introduce PN3 technology to your process to primarily solve three objectives. One, we want to give you a tool that's easy to use. It's not always easy to go from a paper-based process to an electronic process and have it go smoothly. And one of the keys to that is the tool has to be easy to use. Secondly, you have to be able to easily configure it to adhere to your organization's policies and procedures, meaning I need to be able to build workflows easily without IT involvement and IT assistance. I need to be able to build workflows with a variety of different options so that it can make sure that they adhere to my policies and procedures. And the last critical component of that is that it needs to be able to seamlessly integrate with Dynamics GP, because without that seamless integration, there's going to be a lot of duplication of effort, which impacts the efficiencies that you're looking for. So a lot of our clients have said, you know, we want to eliminate paper to improve three things. We want to improve process efficiencies, process visibility, and internal controls. We also host a few webinars throughout the year where we ask our clients to share their experiences with organizations that are contemplating AP or purchasing automation projects. And one of the questions we always pose during that webinar is, how did PN3 improve your accounts payable procedures? I'm going to share with you some of the information that is typically presented. Paperless workflows. Our clients say having a web-based tool that allows them to implement paperless workflows is great, because users can approve transactions, search for transactions, code transactions in a web-based environment, whether they're in the office, on travel, or working from home. Their paperless workflows allow them to eliminate the need to have to route paper throughout the organization. Being able to check on the impact that these transactions will have on your budget. Ideal for a purchasing application, but we show you that in a payables application as well. Improved accountability. Our clients say that there's now approved accountability and less finger pointing from outside of AP and inside of AP, because the solution keeps track of everyone that's touched it, when they took action. So there's a lot of built-in accountability that helps improve their process. We also have tools that allow you to effectively receive invoices from your vendors electronically via email. And our clients tell us that by receiving 50 to 60% of their invoices via email, it automatically cuts down on the amount of paper that they receive in their organization. Greater visibility, the ability to see at a moment's notice what's going on and where all transactions are. Reduced data entry, obviously a big benefit to the AP team. Reduced data entry also means less mistakes and less journal entries to correct those mistakes. More time to analyze the expenses versus shuffling paper and data entry. Eliminating the need to maintain paper files. And audits become a lot more efficient, because when your auditors are looking for information, instead of you having to go and grab paper documents for them, our clients give their auditors read-only access to PN3, and when they need transactions, they pull them up themselves, and they don't have to interrupt their staff when they're conducting work in their normal process. Secondly, we also asked during that webinar, what impact did PN3 have on the allocation of labor resources in accounting and finance? Give a quick view of what some of those answers were. It allows their AP team, and sometimes that AP team is one person, sometimes it's multiple people, but they can process AP in 50% less time. And by doing that, it allows them to do more effective review and analysis, allows them to assist with other projects in accounting and finance, and reduces the need to bring in temporary staffing. So those projects that you've been trying to do for months or years, it now frees up your staff to assist with those projects. Our tools allow you to use PN3 with PC, a Mac, a tablet, or a smartphone. We also have mobile applications that make it easy for users to fill out expense reports and payment requests from their mobile applications. These next few slides are just a few logos of a few of our PN3 clients. You'll see it's a wide variety of organizations in a wide variety of industries have implemented PN3. In many cases, it's just to solve their AP challenges, but in other cases, they're looking to solve not only their AP challenges, but their purchase authorization challenges as well. Now is the time for us to transition into a demonstration so that you can see PN3 in action. I'm going to take a step out of the slides for a minute. We are going to come back to the slides to do a review, but I'm going to take a step out of the slides for a minute, and we're going to go into an actual demonstration of PN3 so that you can see PN3 in action. Jason, this might be a good time for us to launch the first poll question, if we could.
Okay, I will get that opened up right now. And you should see that again to the right of the main presentation window. All right, I see some answers starting to come in. We'll give about another 15 or 20 seconds for folks to choose answers and respond on that. Thanks for your participation.
Thanks, Jason.
All right, and 5-second warning here, and then we will start to close this one out. All right. And that's going to need a few more seconds to close out. So, Derek, if you want to continue, feel free.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jason. All right. I've logged into PN3 as an AP processor, and we find the best way to give you a feel for how PN3 works is to go through a workflow example. So that's what we'll do today. We'll go through some workflow examples so you can see how PN3 operates. I've logged in as Pamela Hood, an AP user, and Pamela has received an invoice that she'd like to get authorization to pay the invoice. You'll notice right away that PN3 is a web application. The users are going to access PN3 from a browser. It could be a cloud solution. The software could also be installed internally on your servers. But again, users are going to always access PN3 from a browser. There are a variety of ways that Pamela, the AP user, can get invoices into PN3. You can also decentralize it and allow users outside of accounting to get invoices into PN3 if that meets your procedures requirements. One of the ways to get invoices into PN3 is using some of our batch processes. So if I had a batch of invoices, I can scan a batch directly into PN3. Or I can go to a high-speed scanner on my network, scan there, and import batches into PN3. We also provide you the ability, if you have staff that have credit cards and you want to get those credit card charges into PN3 for staff to confirm the charges, to code them, and attach their supporting documents, you can import those credit card charges in. We also give you the ability to import invoices from a spreadsheet. The last system here, one of our more popular, is called our eCapture system. What our clients do is if they don't already have one, they create an email address that's dedicated for the receipt of vendor invoices. So they'll call it Invoices or AP or Payables at their domain. They'll let their vendors know that instead of sending us paper invoices, we've implemented an AP automation tool, and we prefer that you email PDF files as the invoices to the email address that they've created. We tell the PN3 system to monitor that email address. When we see an email come in with a single PDF file or multiple PDF files attached, we grab each PDF file and we route it to AP. So you don't have to monitor that email account. PN3 will grab each PDF file and route it to AP. You can also grab off of the PDF the invoice number, the invoice date, and the invoice amount. We identify the vendor from where the email is coming from, so it reduces your data entry effort here. You can simply link it to a PO if it's a PO invoice. If not, you can simply route it out for approval. Let's go through a workflow example. So I'm going to come out of the batch process, and I'm going to tell PN3 that I just have a single invoice. So I'm going to select New Invoice. PN3 will ask me, do you want to scan it or import it? I have a small scanner connected to my laptop, so I'm going to tell it I want to scan the invoice. I place the invoice into the feeder of that scanner. So when I hit Start Scan, PN3 is going to scan this invoice in and create an image of the invoice that Pamela, the AP user, can use to route the invoice out for approval. So everyone should now see an invoice on the screen for Productivity Incorporated. Pamela says, I want to route this invoice to Mary Jones. Before I do that, though, I want to attach some header information to it. So I want to tell PN3, who's the vendor? This vendor information comes from your active vendors in SL, so you don't have to worry about maintaining vendors in PN3. If they're in GP, Dynamics GP. If they're active in Dynamics GP, you'll see them in PN3. I'm also going to tell PN3 what my invoice number is. I can type in or select my invoice date from a calendar and put in the invoice amount. I'm going to tell PN3 that I want to send this invoice to Mary Jones. I've selected the manager that I want to route it to. If I want to, I can code the invoice now. But in this first example, Pamela's going to send it to Mary uncoded and let Mary code it as a part of the approval process. So when I hit Save and Upload, you'll see the page refresh. And I'll get confirmation that this invoice was captured today, October the 4th, at 12:18 by Pamela Hood and was routed to Mary Jones. PN3 also integrates with your email system so that we can send email alerts to staff to let them know when there are transactions awaiting their action. So Mary will receive an email alert. There's a link in the email alert that takes Mary to the login page. I'm going to now log in as Mary Jones, the manager we just routed the invoice to. As soon as Mary logs in, we present to her what we call her PN3 task list. Most clients call it their PN3 inbox. This last invoice in Mary's task list is the invoice we just routed to her. So Mary opens it up, and she takes a look at the invoice so that she can determine what action she'd like to take. Mind you, again, Mary could be in the office, she could be on travel, she could be on her tablet, she could be wherever she is, on whatever device she's on, and she can participate in this process. We've set up Mary as a manager, so you'll see in PN3 that Mary's role is manager. That says that Mary has the ability to approve transactions. Mary also, after receiving this invoice, if she determines that it's not hers, she can decide not to take any action, and she can route the invoice back to AP or send it to another staff person. If she wants to, she can even put in a note to explain why she's doing that. But in this case, Mary says, I'm ready to approve this invoice. So she selects Approve. I put in specifically a control in this particular workflow that says managers must code before they can approve. So Mary forgot that, so we remind her. Not all of our clients have this control in, but quite a few do. So Mary says, I'm sorry, I forgot. I'm now ready to code the invoice. Mary selects Add New Coding. Just like PN3 integrates with Dynamics GP to have all of your vendor information, that same thing applies to your chart of accounts. So Mary can now come into PN3 and she can code the invoice. You'll see the accounts and the description. Now in this example, we're showing the valid strings in Dynamics GP. A lot of our clients prefer to break this up and have a separate field for each segment. Maybe a field for your account, a field for your department, a field for your division. Whatever your structure is, we can break this up into separate fields, or we can show the full string as you're seeing it here. We also give users the ability to filter the drop-down by numeric, or I can filter the drop-down by my alpha character, so I can put in my description and filter the drop-down that way as well. You can also restrict at the user level which codes are available to a user. So you don't have to give full access to your chart of accounts to all users. You can define that at the user level. Now in this example, I'm just creating a single line of coding equal to my transaction amount. But that, as you know, is not always appropriate. We give you the ability to break down that coding in as many layers of coding as you need. There's really no limit. We can simply run a validation to confirm that the sum of the coding equals the transaction amount. After coding the invoice, if you have budget data in GP, we can even let you drill down to see what impact transactions will have on your budget. It will show your annual budget, what's committed already, what your balance currently is, what's pending approval, and what your balance will be if all pending transactions are approved. And this functionality is available in both our purchasing and our payable systems. Mary says, that's great. That's exactly where I thought we were. I'm ready to approve this. We talked earlier about guaranteeing that your policies and procedures are being adhered to. This is the first example of that. I set up Mary as a manager. However, the level of manager that Mary is, Mary's approval limit is top-stopped at $1,000. So I've told PN3 that. I've also told PN3 that Mary's manager is Susan. So when Mary approves this invoice, because it's a $10,000 invoice and exceeds Mary's approval limit, when Mary approves it, it automatically routes to her manager, Susan, and it presents to Mary the next transaction that was in her PN3 task list. I'm going to sign out here as Mary, and I'm going to sign in as Mary's manager, Susan. Susan would have received an email alert. She can log into PN3, and now Susan's task list is presented. This last invoice is the invoice that Mary just approved. So when Susan opens it up, like Mary, she could see the invoice, but when she looks into the invoice processing milestones, she can see that Mary just approved it and the date and time that Mary took that action. Susan says, wow, let me check the coding and make sure Mary coded it correctly. As Mary's manager, if Susan wants to edit the coding, she can. Susan says, I know I don't have a PO for this, but I know that I have a 2016 contract with this vendor. And I want to see, not the contract, but I want to see what we've paid so far against this contract. So Susan hits edit, and she links this invoice to the 2016 contract with this vendor. And when she says, I want to save that linkage, PN3 will attach the contract document. So if Susan wants to see the contract, she can. But she can then hit contract info to drill down to see the value of the contract, what's been paid so far, the balance, and when the contract expires. Again, one of the key objectives is to improve process efficiency. So we want to put as much information at the fingertips of staff as we can. Susan says, I'm ready to approve this as well. Susan's approval limit is $25,000. So when Susan approves this, it will automatically route back to AP as a fully approved transaction, and PN3 will then present to Susan the next transaction that was in her PN3 task list. I'm going to come back over to my login as Pamela, the AP user, and we're going to look into Pamela's task list. And we see that that invoice that Susan just approved has returned to AP. Pamela can see that 2 managers have approved it and the date and time that each manager approved it. She can also check the coding. She knows that this invoice is fully approved based upon the workflow rules that you've set up because it now has a status of manager approved. After Pamela checks the coding, she can check to see what period this is posting to, and when she's ready, she can simply approve the transaction. When she does that, PN3 will look to see if Pamela has a batch open in GP for the period that this invoice is going to. If she does, we put it in that batch automatically. If she doesn't, we will create a batch in GP for Pamela and put the invoice in that batch. Key point here is that Pamela will never have to open the voucher entry screen and do any data entry. PN3 is going to pass the data over. You will have to go into your GP batches to post those batches and to process payments so that that payment information can flow back to PN3, but you're not going to have to enter the voucher, the header, or the distribution. I've gone through quite a bit, so I want to pause, Jason, for a second. Let's see maybe if any questions have come in. If so, this might be a good time to entertain any questions that may have come in so far.
All right, great. So yeah, please do enter any questions at this point, and we can start to take some of those. So first question that came in is the product integrated with project accounting, manufacturing, and field services modules in GP?
Yes, we can integrate PN3 with any of the modules that you use in GP, third-party modules or Microsoft-based modules. We can integrate PN3 with really any of those modules that you're using with GP.
Okay, great. Another question here, can we attach supporting documents to an invoice?
You certainly can. There's an Add Documents button, and so you can attach supporting documents to any transaction that you're processing in PN3. An invoice, you'll see later, an expense report, a payment request form. You can certainly attach supporting documents to any transaction.
Okay, those are all the questions I see for now.
Great. Thanks, Jason. So let's go ahead and continue with our demonstration, but please feel free to post any questions if you have any more. All right, so one of the questions we get often is, you know, how do I know what's out there? You say now that we have everything electronically, at a moment's notice, I can tell what's going on. How do I do that? One of the ways to do that is through reports in PN3. One of the reports is called the Open Invoices report. So I can go into PN3, generate the Open Invoices report. This report says, I'm going to show you everything that's in the PN3 workflow that has not been fully approved and sent to GP. I'll break up the transactions by how aged they are. You'll be able to see the vendor, the invoice number, the invoice date, the invoice amount, and a key column. This last column shows the owner of the invoice. Whose PN3 task list is it sitting in right now? So you'll never have to guess where any transactions are. You'll always be able to see the status of the transaction in PN3. And every report can be viewed online, printed, and exported to Excel. We also give you the ability to electronically search for invoices. And you can use, as you see here, a wide variety of fields to search for invoices. I can search by vendor, invoice number, invoice date. I can search by my chart of account structure, PO number if I'm using POs. So an example being, staff typically would call AP sometimes to find out if something's been paid. If they have access to the transaction, and what I mean by that is you can provide security that will control who has access to transactions, and there are a variety of ways that you can do that. They can put in the vendor name as an example, and if they said, you know, I'm looking for an invoice that was approved in August, or an invoice that came in August. So I'm doing a date range search on the invoice date, August the 1st through the 31st for this vendor. I can add additional fields to my search criteria if I want to filter it down further. But I'm saying I want to see every invoice for this vendor in this time frame. So when I hit search, PN3 will give me a list of all of the invoices. And I'm checking to see if they've been paid. So I open up the particular invoice I want to see. When I see AP approved, I now know it's in GP. I can come over here to the payment fields and see if it's been paid. If it has, it will show me how it was paid, the payment number, and the payment date. So I don't have to pick up the phone to call AP to find out the status. I can find the status in P&3. And I don't even have to be a GP user, because we find that for most of our clients, a wide variety of, or the majority, I should say, of their P&3 users outside of accounting and finance aren't GP users, so they can see a lot of what they want directly in P&3. All right, a couple more things I want to show you in our payables application before we go through a quick purchasing workflow and then do a PO invoice. We also have two electronic forms in P&3. One of those forms is the expense report form. So we give staff the ability to open up the expense report form and submit expenses. This can be done via a browser on a PC or a Mac, and we're introducing in about a month a mobile application that allows staff to do that from their mobile phones as well. So as a user, I could come in and I could say, I put in my purpose, you get my typing right here, and I could say I have expenses that I want to submit that are, let's say, from the 1st of September through the, let's say, the 30th of September. And I can then enter my expenses. So I could say on the 1st of September, I had a trip Boston. This is a client-defined drop-down list. You can even map these to your accounts. And so I could say I want to put in my airfare, and I flew United, and I can put in the amount. I can also go, I'm just going to grab any code here. I can code this. I can hit Save, Copy, and Add. I can then put another expense in. So I could say I also had another expense on the 1st, and this is going to be my lodging expense. And I stayed at a Hyatt. Put in the cost for that and save that. I can attach my receipts and other supporting documents. I can also enter my mileage. So if I said, I still had miles on the 8th of September, you'll notice when I select the date, it pulls in the rate. You will control the rate for a given date range. So your expense report users will not have to enter the rate. They grab the date, it enters the rate automatically, and they simply put in the miles, and P&3 will calculate the amount. So staff can use this form to put in an expense report, attach their receipts and supporting documents, and then submit their expense report into the P&3 workflow for approval. We also have a form called our payment request form. Staff can use this form if they have a need to pay a vendor, they don't have an invoice, and they're not going to get one. We don't want you to have to introduce or create your own internal invoice for that process. Maybe you have other supporting documents, but if you don't have an invoice for this request and you're not going to get one, use the payment request form, because from there you can identify who the vendor is. You can say that this is a deposit, this is a user-defined drop-down or a customer-defined. So I'm going to say this is a deposit, and I need to try to get the payment by October the 21st. Then I can use these fields in the payment request form, put in my description, my amount. I can code this. I can save it. I can attach supporting documents. If I have another one, I can put another one in. But this payment request form allows me to submit and route things for approval. Once fully approved, they'll go to AP. They already will have in it the vendor information, an invoice number, an invoice date in the form, and that information will, once approved by AP, flow over into GP. All right. One of the things we haven't done so far is a PO invoice. So we're going to do that in a second. Before we do that, I want to go through a purchase authorization workflow. Because as I mentioned, about 30%, or maybe even as high as 35% of our clients not only implement our payable solution, but they're also looking to control the spend within their organization, so they implement our purchasing solution as well. Sometimes as a standalone solution, not integrated with GP. Other times, we integrate it with GP as well. And I'll explain what I mean by that during the demonstration. Before I do that, Jason, I just want to pause for a second and see if any other questions have come in related to our payables product that we might want to answer now before I move into a demonstration of our purchasing solution.
Okay, so a couple of other questions have come in here, and let's pull the first one up. So someone asks, is PM3 available in Spanish?
Unfortunately, it is not. We do not have the only version of PM3 at this time is a version of PM3 in English.
Okay, and is there an option to attach a map as documentation for mileage?
Well, you can attach any document or any file type to any transaction. So if you have a map that you'd like to attach to an expense report where you have your mileage, you can certainly do that. We have some unique requests from time to time. We even had one client that said, you know, I'd like to be able to integrate PM3 with MapQuest so that instead of a user putting in their miles, they're going to put in their starting address and their ending address, and the software is going to calculate the miles versus them entering it in. I know we've done that for 2 clients, not many, but that is some of the options of the types of customizations we can do. That is not, by the way, part of the base product.
Okay, those are all the questions for now.
All right, great. Thanks, Jason. Well, let's do this. Let's go. We're going to come back to payables, but let's do this. We're going to go through a purchase authorization workflow, and then we'll come back and do a PO invoice. I'm going to come in. I'm going to log in again as Mary Jones. Mary was that manager, one of the managers that approved that first invoice. So Mary logs into PM3 for purchase requisitions. You'll see that it has a very similar look and feel as PM3 for payables. And Mary says, I need to get authorization to make a purchase. Mary can do that in one of 2 ways. She can open up a blank requisition form. So Mary can open up this blank form, fill it out, put all our items in it, and submit it for approval. But we also give users the ability to generate a new request by defaulting in data that they selected from a previous PO. So I can say I want to generate a new request using a previous PO. I can select that PO number, and PM3 will pull in all of the data from that PO. And I'm going to come and make changes to it. So I'm going to say, no, I want to try to get this by 12/15/2016. So I'm going to change my date required. If I wanted to, I can put delivery instructions, comments in. These are all of the items in my earlier PO. I can delete items. I can edit items. I can add new items. But when I'm ready, I can simply tell PM3 to save my requisition form. So now Mary has this requisition form in her PM3 inbox, and she can decide what action she'd like to take. She can attach supporting documents. If she has quotes or brochures that she'd like to attach, she can at this point. Mary says, I'm ready to get this approved. So Mary's going to approve it. However, if you recall in the earlier workflow, even though Mary's a manager, her approval limit is $1,000. This is a $22,750 request. So when she approves it, it's not going to let her generate a PO. It's going to automatically route it to her manager, Susan, because it exceeds Mary's approval limit. So I quickly sign out, and I'm signing in as Susan, and the transaction is sitting in Susan's task list. So Susan opens it up. Susan can see that Mary approved it, because in the requisition processing milestones, again, we keep track of everyone that's touched it and the action they've taken. So Susan can see that Mary has approved it. Susan can drill down and check on the items. She can look in more detail in the form if she'd like. If there are any supporting documents attached, she can view those. Maybe Susan has a question for Mary, and she says, you know what, I'm not going to come out of PM3 and send my question in Outlook or whatever email client. I'm going to stay in PM3. Because I want PM3 to record this conversation that I have with Mary. So I'm going to tell PM3 that I want to send this communication to Mary, and I'm going to send my question to Mary so that Mary can respond in PM3, and the conversation I have with Mary is now recorded and permanently linked to this transaction. So let's assume that Mary has responded and answered Susan's question. I don't want to log out as Susan and then log in as Mary. So Susan gets their response and says, I'm ready to approve this. Susan's approval limit is $25,000. It exceeds the request amount. By the way, I want to also show you the reject functionality. This works the same in purchasing or payables. Anytime a user tells P&3 they want to reject the transaction, it's going to require them to put in a note as explanation, and it's going to send the request back to the initiator. But in this example, Susan says, I'm approving this. It's within Susan's approval limit, so when Susan approves it in our purchasing workflow, it either goes back to the initiator, or if you have a purchasing or buying department, it can go there as well. But in this case, we have a decentralized setup, so when Susan approves it, it goes back to Mary as a fully approved transaction. So I'm going to sign out here as Susan, and I'm going to sign in as Mary. Mary opens up the approved request. She knows that it's fully approved now because the Generate Purchase Order button has been created, so Mary can select that. P&3 will create a PO number. If Mary wants to send a PDF of the PO to your vendor, she can select Generate PDF. We give you the ability to load your logo and your terms and conditions, and you can then email that order to the vendor to place the order. We also, in our P&3 system, give you the ability to receive against open POs. So I can come in and say I ordered 5 of these, and in the first shipment I received 5 of the 5200s and also 5 of the 5400s, and I can save that receiving information. And then we allow AP to see not only the valid POs, but to see what's been received against those POs. So quickly, I'm going to come back here and I'm going to go into payables, and I'm going to tell P&3 that I want to pull in a new invoice. I'm going to hit import file here. I'm going to browse to a file, and I'm going to say, here's my invoice from this vendor Streamline. And it's referencing PO number 102. So I'm going to see if that's an open PO. First, I'm going to filter the PO number drop down by vendor. So I look for PO number 102, and I see it. And when I select that, it pulls in all of the PO information, item code, description, quantity, unit price, extended cost, shows me what's been received against the PO, what was previously invoiced against this open PO, what's been received, not invoiced. So it allows me to use this data from the PO to do three-way matches based upon receiving quantities, based upon pricing, based upon total PO amount. So as an AP user, maybe this is an invoice against a PO that I don't have to route for manager approval because the three-way match passes. If so, I can push this to GP. If not, I can get a manager involved in this process through an electronic workflow to determine what action to take on this. Maybe there's a pricing discrepancy, maybe there's a quantity discrepancy, but something that you want to get resolved before pushing the approved invoice to GP. This concludes the demonstration portion of today's webinar. What I'd like to do next is just kind of do a quick review. So I want to kind of review what we've covered. So in P&3 for payables, we have the ability to efficiently scan and receive invoices electronically. We have electronic payment requests and expense report forms. Automated routing based upon your policies and procedures. Email alerts and reminders. Paperless coding and approvals. Budget integration. You can check the real-time status of all invoices. No more paper to file. Online search for invoices, payment requests, and expense reports. And you can put some very tight security around that if you'd like to. You can also track contract financials in their documents. There's a place, I didn't get to that in the demonstration, where you can store vendor documents, W-9 and other correspondence. Also, where you can put in other vendor communications, and you can see vendor financials, meaning if I'm a user, I can see what we paid the vendor so far this year and what we paid them last year. In our purchase requisition solution, electronic purchase requests, attached supporting documents, automated routing based upon your policies and procedures, again, email alerts and reminders, paperless coding and approvals, budget integration, online receipt confirmations, and online search and retrieval of purchase requests and purchase orders. Next steps. It's our hope that you've seen enough in today's webinar to intrigue you to the point where you said, I'd really like to learn a little bit more. We find that the webinars are ideal to introduce you to the capabilities, but the best way to really get an intimate understanding of P&3, how it integrates with GP, and more importantly, how it might improve your processes is through a one-on-one demonstration. That way we can open up the phone lines and have a real detailed discussion. And if from that you feel that there is a P&3 solution that meets your needs, we can then present a proposal and answer all of the questions you have and provide you a long list of references. My contact information is on this last slide. This might be a good time. I know you have some housekeeping items, Jason. This might be a good time to launch that last poll question as well.
Okay, we will get that opened up right now. So folks in the audience should see that there. We also have a couple of remaining questions. Derek, do you want to get to those now while folks are filling that out?
This is perfect time. Yep.
Okay. So first question, how many backup sites does PN3 have?
You're probably referring to our software as a service or our cloud solution. PN3, we use an organization called Rackspace for our cloud hosting, and Rackspace has several critical backup sites throughout the U.S. that I'm aware of. I'm not sure if they have any international backup sites, but there are data centers or sites throughout the U.S.
Okay, great. And another question here. Do you have a solution for staff expense reports?
Yes. In our payable solution, there's expense report functionality in that for staff expense reports. So you can create users of your staff in PN3, and they'll be able to use PN3 to submit their expense reports, attach supporting documents, receipts and other supporting documents, and submit those expense reports for approval. So that is a basic feature in our PN3 for payable solution.
Okay, I want to make a final call for questions here. We do have one more to go, so if you have been saving any, please enter them now into the Q&A block. How much support from our IT team is needed to implement PN3?
That's a great question, and it will really vary whether it's our software as a service or our cloud solution or an on-premises installation. If it's on-premises, we just really need them to let us know which server or servers where they want us to install PN3. The PN3 database is typically on the same database server that GP is on. The software is typically on another server. So we just need them to let us know where to install everything. They don't have to be involved in any ongoing support of the PN3. Just if you're housing it on site, they'll have to obviously manage those server backups, which they're already doing today. So your IT involvement is really minimal. Whether it's an on-premises installation, and it's even more minimal if it's a cloud solution, because then we're housing all of your data and documents in our quote-unquote PN3 cloud.
Another question here, does PN3 read information from the scanned or imported invoice, such as vendor number or invoice number?
PN3 does not read any data off of a scanned invoice. So if you receive a paper invoice into your organization and you're scanning that invoice directly into PN3, it does not read any information off of those scanned invoices.
Okay, well that appears to be the end of our question queue. So we can, I think, move on and perhaps begin wrapping up, Derek?
That would be perfect, yep.
Okay, great. So if you do have any other questions, obviously, you have Derek's contact information there on the screen. I want to remind folks also, we do have a very brief survey that will pop up after the session ends, and if you could take 15 or 20 seconds to just fill that out, it really is helpful in giving us and our speakers a bit of extra feedback on what you thought of today's event. So with that, we will conclude today's event. Derek, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you a lot, Jason, and thanks for everyone that attended today's session, and I hope you found it informative and a good use of the last hour or so of your time. Thanks a lot.
All right, and with that, we will conclude today's event. Have a great day, everyone.